5 days before the apocalypse, someone spread the news of the end of the world on the internet, and I, somewhat confused, hoarded a large amount of supplies. I intended to survive the apocalypse with these supplies, but unexpectedly, I was betrayed and pushed off the rooftop by my malicious best friend. In my next life, I am determined to survive until the end. 1. A cold dagger pierced my back, and a voice whispered in my ear, "Who knows when this apocalypse will end? You're just wasting food by living, better off dead." Then, with a kick, I was sent tumbling down from the rooftop. As I fell, my eyes gradually lost their luster, the world turned dark, and I lost consciousness. After an unknown amount of time, a familiar voice reached my ears. "Lydia, look, that idiot is spreading the news of the apocalypse on the internet again. I wonder if they've gone mad from watching too much TV. Actually believing in an apocalypse. Lydia is my name. But wasn't I killed by my malicious best friend and thrown off the roof? What is happening?" And this familiar voice, isn't it that of my malicious best friend? Looking around at the familiar dorm, memories long buried in my mind began to resurface. At this moment, I finally understood. I had been reborn, back to before the outbreak of the apocalypse. "Lydia, why aren't you speaking? You don't really believe that idiot's words, do you?" Seeing me distracted and unwilling to speak, my friend Sarah wrapped her arm around me, leaning her face against my shoulder, and asked, "In my previous life, I liked watching apocalyptic movies. Upon hearing the news, I thought it was wise to stock up on supplies, spending 6 months' worth of living expenses on rice, flour, and oil, which I stored in a rented house outside the school. After the apocalypse broke out, Sarah pleaded bitterly for me to take her in. Valuing our friendship, I risked the food shortage to help her, but who knew? Within days, she would brutally turn against me, acting out a real-life version of the farmer and the snake. Now, living again, seeing her seemingly innocent appearance, but knowing her ugly true nature, I felt nauseous. However, I held it in, as it was not yet time to let her suspect anything. Do you think I'd be foolish enough to believe such things? I was just thinking about the final exams. It's getting late. I should head to my elective class, and you can rest here in the dorm. I made up an excuse on the spot, which was timely because I had a class in the afternoon, so she wouldn't suspect anything. As I closed the door, I heard Sarah's voice rise faintly within the room. "Just because she has better grades and looks a bit prettier, one day, I'll make sure she's beneath my feet." Initially, I thought her betrayal was due to the complicated human nature during the apocalypse, but it turned out, it was all her pretense. She had been envious of me from the start, never truly wanting to be friends. Fortunately, having been reborn, I saw through it all. Without my help, let's see how she survives the apocalypse. 2. According to my memory, the news about the apocalypse was posted on the internet 5 days before it erupted. I don't know if the person who posted it was reborn like me, but the message appeared on all social platforms, and no one believed it. Even the poster almost got in trouble. Who would believe such baseless claims? Learning from the past, I just commented no harm in being prepared under the post using an alias, and then I disappeared from the scene. Whether anyone believed it or not, it no longer concerned me. There were still 5 days left. In my previous life, due to lack of money and uncertainty about whether the apocalypse would actually happen, I only spent half a term's living expenses on some basic supplies, which barely got me through a short period before I tragically died at Sarah's hands. After being reborn, naturally, I would prepare everything thoroughly. Although I hardly had any money on me, my good credit made borrowing a breeze. With just one loan, I effortlessly secured several $100,000. Once I had the funds, the next step was to construct a sturdy shelter. The house I rented was about 5 kilometers from the school, located in a neighborhood born from the economic bubble. It was a remote area with a low occupancy rate. The building I lived in had 18 floors, with only 2 apartments on each floor. According to what I knew, the apartment opposite was also for rent, but it remained unoccupied even as the apocalypse approached. Now, I planned to rent the opposite apartment as well and transform it, along with my current one, into a shelter. I contacted the agent and told him a classmate urgently needed to rent the apartment, which prompted him to leave the keys in the mailbox downstairs after I transferred him 6 months' rent. Given that rentals were rare in that complex, the agent was naturally thrilled to make a deal. I didn't rush to pick up the keys downstairs. Instead, I went back home first and started to plan my next steps with pen and paper. Essentials like food, water, and medicine had to be prepared, but the most crucial part was how to transport these supplies without attracting attention. In my previous life, I hadn't bought much, and since the occupancy in the complex was low, A few bags of rice and flour didn't raise any eyebrows. However, delivering supplies by the truckload to the complex would definitely be noticed. I needed a plan. As I pondered, I listed out all the items I needed to buy in a notebook. There was a lot to prepare, especially since I had experienced the apocalypse in my previous life and knew which issues couldn't be overlooked. But now, with only 5 days, even though I knew exactly what was needed, I had to consider both time and cost. After writing the shopping list, I started by cleaning up the room. I threw out all the clutter that was just taking up space without any use, but when I saw the contents of a black bag left under the bed by a previous tenant, who had forgotten it and never showed up despite saying he would, I hesitated. Let it be, it might come in handy. It took me 3 hours and several trips to dispose of all the useless stuff. Next, I had to figure out how to transport the supplies without anyone noticing. The residency rate in the complex was already low, and there were only a few security guards. Plus, with most young people at work during the day, the guard monitoring the CCTV often fell asleep. I quietly made my way to the underground parking lot, adjusted all the cameras that could potentially capture my actions, and, ensuring that no one would notice, I began my plan. Firstly, as a standard procedure and to make my hideout secure, I had the construction team replace all the windows with the strongest available on the market under the guise of preparing a marital home. They were reinforced and fitted with one-way film, following the survival novel's guidelines, even though I lived on the top floor and it was hard to see inside without the film. In an age of technological explosions, the potential dangers were too vast. Anyone with a telescope or a drone could easily become a threat. Failure often stems from overlooking the small details, so I had to consider everything. As for the door, it was replaced with a blast-resistant one, though its effectiveness remained to be proven. Meanwhile, I secretly had workers install some solar panels. I wasn't expecting a luxurious life post-apocalypse. Having just enough power to run essential electronics and surveillance would suffice. Using the urgency of an impending marriage as a cover, and paying double the market rate, I set about securing my future in this precarious world. The construction team assured me that they would complete the work within 3 days. The security in this residential area is quite poor, with a low occupancy rate in this building. One can simply enter through the underground garage and take the elevator without encountering the property management or security. All the young people have gone to work. As for the elderly who have nothing better to do than to wander around, a simple activity like distributing eggs at the entrance would surely attract them. Having discussed the renovation requirements, I paid the deposit to the construction team and then focused all my efforts on stocking up on supplies. In the post-apocalyptic stories I've read, protagonists often concoct various reasons to buy water and food from the supermarket to avoid arousing suspicion, yet such actions are ironically conspicuous. Buying large amounts of water and food in the supermarket would certainly raise eyebrows. I found some local wholesalers online and ordered water, various canned foods, compressed biscuits, individual rations, and items like dried meat and mini hot pots, arranging for delivery in 3 days. Compared to supermarkets, these wholesalers not only offer cheaper goods, but also routinely deliver to various retail outlets, so my large order wouldn't draw their attention. Bigger clients would be their main focus. Besides water, I didn't order much of the other items, just 10 boxes of each. Firstly, renting and renovating the apartment had already cost me a significant amount, leaving me with little cash on hand. Secondly, items like mini hot pots aren't exactly economical or sustainable like grains. Isn't it much better to fry a bag of rice or flour, which can last a long time? In a post-apocalyptic world, survival is what matters, not luxury. I visited a grain and oil wholesale market farther away and ordered 30 bags of flour and 50 bags of rice, each weighing 20 kilograms. I also bought ample supplies of oil, salt, soy sauce, and vinegar, with delivery scheduled for 4 days later. I also purchased several boxes of high-calorie or nutritionally complete items like chocolate, soy milk powder, and baby formula. As for toiletries like sanitary pads, toothbrushes, and toothpaste, as well as some common medicines, none of which are restricted, I distributed my purchases across several pharmacies, buying just a few boxes at each, which went unnoticed. After resolving the supplies issue, I returned home exhausted and lay down on the bed, thoroughly enjoying the rest. During this time, Sarah called me, asking in her sycophantic manner why I hadn't returned to the dormitory after class. I dismissively told her I was out and wouldn't return today, then hung up. Tomorrow the house would be renovated, and I tried hard to recall everything that happened in my previous life to see if there were any oversights. With these supplies, I could survive for quite a long time, but no one knows when the crisis will end. Canned foods and dried meats generally have a long shelf life. Self-heating hot pots and similar items can last up to 3 years. Indeed, in a post-apocalyptic scenario, one doesn't need to eat well. Long-term lack of fresh fruits or vegetables can be compensated with vitamin supplements. However, no matter how much you store, there will come a day when it runs out. What then? Sustainable living and self-sufficiency are what I should be considering. Suddenly, I felt that I had bought too little, and even thought of utilizing the rooftop terrace. I spent another night carefully thinking everything over, jotting down all conceivable necessities until my head ached, and then I fell asleep. After a night's rest, my mind was refreshed. The next morning, after handing over the keys to the workers, I continued with my purchasing plans. I found a new grain and oil wholesale market and ordered 10 bags each of soybeans, red beans, and green beans. These beans could not only be cooked directly for meals, but also provide essential nutrients. I can still grow bean sprouts. As for the rooftop, I hadn't figured out how to use it effectively, but I still went ahead and bought seeds, soil, and fertilizer. My approach was, be mentally prepared, act later. After preparing the food, the next thing to prepare was weapons. I bought some self-defense weapons popular among single women online, like anti-wolf spray and stun batons. I was well aware that these items might not be very useful to me, but holding them gave me a bit of extra security. And I also stocked up on things like drone batteries. Once everything was ready, I returned to school to continue my classes. Sarah kept asking what I had been up to these past few days, but I brushed her off with various excuses. Previously, I would never have kept such things from her. 3 days passed quickly, and the construction team called me to come and inspect their work. After checking the newly fortified doors and windows, I promptly paid the final installment and notified the wholesalers to start delivering the supplies I had ordered. The local ladies were slowed down by their stockpile of eggs, and batch after batch of their goods were also delivered. Everything was moving in the right direction. Just when I thought I could sneak all the supplies into my home unnoticed, the unexpected happened. Why did you buy so much stuff? You don't actually believe those online doomsday predictions, do you? I was busy directing the workers to move things into my house when I heard a voice from behind. I turned around. It was someone I had seen a few times, a resident of our building and apparently a relationship broadcaster, someone of a minor internet celebrity. He hardly ever left his apartment, but today, for some reason, I ran into him in the underground garage. Bad luck, I muttered to myself. Turning back to him, I smiled and said, "Oh, it's nothing much. I'm about to graduate. And I'm hosting a party with my classmates tomorrow, just getting everything ready ahead of time." I see. He didn't say much else, though his eyes kept darting to the boxes in the workers' hands, trying to make out what was inside. After realizing he couldn't tell, he left the garage. It seems impossible to keep this a secret from everyone. Luckily, the grain and oil were already moved up, and these were just chocolates and dried meats. During our conversation, I made a show of sending voice messages to several classmates, trying to make him believe my story so he wouldn't covet my supplies if the apocalypse did arrive. After this minor episode, no other incidents occurred. Under my direction, the delivery staff efficiently moved all the supplies to my upstairs room. In the following days, I purchased 2 door barricades and quietly installed numerous security cameras throughout the building. After adjusting the cameras to ensure stable signal and coverage, I never went out again. 2 days later at noon, I simply ate something and then sat by the window, quietly waiting for the apocalypse to arrive. In my previous life, I was also sitting here waiting for the apocalypse, only back then I was worried that if the online rumors were nonsense, I might have to survive on the grains in my room for the rest of the year. Now, I was certain the apocalypse would come at exactly 2 p.m. The bright sunny sky suddenly darkened, the golden sun visibly turning a sinister black-red at a speed visible to the naked eye. Everyone who noticed this phenomenon was stunned and looked up at the sky. Many people took photos with their phones and posted this strange occurrence on various social media platforms. Some called their friends and family to alert them to check the outside situation. As the sun turned black-red, the entire sky gradually turned blood-red. Moments later, thick droplets began to fall from the sky. It was raining, but not normal rain. Many people were frightened by this unprecedented phenomenon. Despite the bizarre rain pouring down on him, he remained unfazed. The more prudent individuals sought shelter from the rain in the mall buildings. News of the strange phenomenon quickly topped the trending lists on various platforms within 2 minutes, sparking widespread discussion about whether something significant was about to happen. In less than 5 minutes, those who had been drenched by the rain began to attack people around them frantically, as if driven mad. It seemed that the only sounds left on the vast land were wails, screams, and cries for help. The transformation from the appearance of the phenomenon to these rain-soaked individuals turning into zombies took merely 20 minutes. The entire city descended into chaos in an instant, resembling a hell on earth, with screams and wails echoing continuously. A pedestrian was struck by a speeding car, and the bewildered driver got out to check on the person's injuries. Taking advantage of the distraction caused by the phenomenon, I cut the power to the elevator, locked the security door, and installed a crash stop device. I had rented both apartments on the 18th floor, the top level, ensuring no one else was around to worry about being blocked from their home. After securing everything, I picked up a pair of binoculars to observe the situation outside the complex. Continuously, individuals were being tackled to the ground by mutated zombies, only to slowly rise and join the ranks of the undead. The air was thick with the scent of blood. Even having experienced this in a past life, the scenes before me left me unsettled for a long time, causing me to vomit my lunch. After cleaning up the vomit and calming myself, I spent the evening by the window, observing the situation inside and outside the complex while noting the habits of the zombies. Through observation and some memories from a previous life, I gained a fair understanding of these zombies. These zombies were exceptionally sensitive to sounds and the scent of blood. Even the slightest noises and smells could attract their attention. Their speed was not slow, and they seemed to operate like perpetual motion machines, never showing signs of fatigue. I witnessed a zombie relentlessly pursue an adult man until he collapsed from exhaustion. With the zombie's pace unaltered, the increase in zombie numbers was much faster than anticipated. By evening, the streets were as silent as still water. This silence became even more terrifying at night, as if it could devour souls, with only the occasional screams and wails confirming that I was still alive. 2 days have passed since the zombie outbreak, during which communication signals were intermittent. Television broadcasts from relevant departments continually reported on the situation outside, urging people not to leave their homes. In group chats and social circles, people were either grateful to be alive or sharing their plight of being trapped without food, willing to pay high prices for deliveries. However, in these times, everyone was wary for their own safety, and no amount of money could persuade anyone to risk their lives. The occupancy rate in the complex was not high, peaking at just a few hundred households. After the apocalypse struck, within just 2 days, only about 50 households remained. No one from our building spoke up in the property group chats, leaving me unsure if I was the only one alive. Some suggested using this time to band together and search for supplies, but most people had some food reserves at home and preferred to wait for rescue. Looking at the piles of supplies in my room, I stayed silent. Believing it was best to let them think I was already dead, I cooked a self-heating hot pot, my first meal since the outbreak started. After being hungry for 2 days, anything tasted delicious. Days passed by steadily. 10 days went by peacefully, but during this time, communication signals worsened, and even those who had been calm in the group chats began to panic. Their food reserves were depleted, and there was no sign of impending rescue. The broadcasts offered comforting words but no useful information. Finally, some couldn't bear it any longer and began venturing out in succession to search for supplies. Some formed small groups, armed with kitchen knives, rolling pins, and steel pipes, while others moved alone, cautiously avoiding zombies. One person, overly nervous, stepped on a beer bottle and fell to the ground. The noise attracted about 7 or 8 zombies roaming nearby, who immediately pounced towards them. The fallen person hadn't even gotten up before a zombie knocked him down and bit into his stomach, his screams echoing through the neighborhood. Seeing this, the others lost all courage to venture out and started running back in fear. Those who ran slowly, fearing they would become the next zombie meal, pushed their companions behind them to attract the zombies' attention, buying themselves a chance to escape. From upstairs, I watched this scene through a telescope and couldn't help but sigh. Just a dozen days into this apocalypse, and already there are those who, to save their own lives, disregard the lives of others. I fear the future will hold even worse. That afternoon, I received a call from Sarah. "Lydia, how are you? I've been so worried about you." "I'm fine, still safe for now." My voice was somewhat cold. I found it almost amusing how she said she was worried. It had been over 10 days since the zombie outbreak, and if she had truly been worried, she would have called sooner. Everyone knew she had run out of food in her dorm and was likely calling to see if I had any food. I wondered what kind of bad karma I must have had in a past life to believe such nonsense. I guessed she would next ask about supplies. Sure enough, before I could even finish, Sarah's voice came through the phone. "Lydia, do you have any supplies? I'm trapped at school and haven't eaten in a day." She had said the same thing in another life. I had felt sorry for her then, told her to come stay with me immediately, and taught her how to avoid zombies, but then she betrayed me, stabbing me and pushing me off the rooftop. Who would have thought the apocalypse on the internet was real? I wasn't prepared at all. If it wasn't for the 2 packs of noodles at home, I would have starved by now. I've already finished the noodles and have been surviving on a few sips of water these past days. I feigned weakness, complaining about the hardships I faced these past days. Upon hearing this, Sarah's voice clearly carried a hint of disappointment, and she hung up before I could finish speaking. Some people are like that. They don't bother speaking to you unless they see some benefit, but there's no need to hold grudges with a dead person, right, today. Feeling good. I took some lamb and beef from the fridge and prepared to enjoy a delightful hot pot meal. This was a feast, especially after eating instant noodles for so many days straight. Even my stomach, accustomed to both technology and hard times, couldn't take it anymore. This hot pot wasn't just any meal. I planned to watch some romantic stories about orange cats during it. Just as I was about to turn to my computer, a familiar face appeared on the surveillance monitor in the underground garage. My close friend, after I explicitly told her I had no supplies, had come here anyway, accompanied by a man. If I hadn't installed surveillance throughout the building and used 90% of the solar power for these monitors, I wouldn't have expected her to show up now. Why would she come here if she doesn't know I have supplies? And how did she get here? Questions swirled in my mind. In another life, it was under my guidance that she found a secluded path into the neighborhood. I had discovered it by accident, a path not shown on navigation software and typically devoid of zombies. Without my guidance, how did she manage to find her way here this time? And the man following her was someone I had never seen before, about 30 years old. They're definitely not students from our school. How did they meet? I was carefully monitoring their every move, apart from Sarah looking a bit disheveled. There was nothing unusual, however. The strange man was holding a fire axe, which seemed to have some black bloodstains on it. The surveillance wasn't clear enough for me to tell whether it was zombie blood or not. The thought that they might have been fighting zombies all the way here crossed my mind, a chilling thought indeed. Anyone capable of killing zombies is definitely more than I can handle. Even though I had already bought items like a tang sword, compound crossbow, and pepper spray, these were no match for a man. Especially for a girl like me with no physical strength. They're more for show than practical use. And then there's Sarah. In my past life, she didn't hesitate to betray me, and now, she managed to get here safely from school. She's no ordinary woman. Having been naive before, I no longer trust human nature in this post-apocalyptic world. If I end up in their hands, my fate would be worse than in my previous life. No matter what, I must find a way to eliminate them. As soon as this thought emerged, my brain started working frantically, constantly analyzing the gap between my enemies and me. An idea sparked by a mental image caught my attention. On the 13th floor of this building, there were 2 zombies. In my past life, when Sarah came looking for me, she encountered these 2 zombies on the 13th floor. Had it not been for my use of a cell phone ringtone to distract the zombies, leading them to the other end of the hallway and letting her escape, she would have been killed by the zombies. This time, however, I planned to use these 2 zombies to kill Sarah, which seemed almost ironic. After confirming the presence of the zombies on the 13th floor through the surveillance system, a simple plan formed in my mind. I picked up the compound crossbow, grabbed the Bluetooth speaker and the black bag from under the bed, and rushed downstairs. The elevator was out of order. Sarah and her companion would have to climb to the 13th floor while watching out for possible zombies, so they wouldn't reach it before me. I had time to prepare. I stealthily arrived on the 13th floor, connected the Bluetooth speaker to my phone, and placed it in an inconspicuous spot near the entrance. My phone had a music app already open, just waiting for me to press the play button, which would then blast music from the speaker. I went up to the 14th floor, set up the contents of the bag, and covered them with a simple disguise. Then, I aimed the compound crossbow at the staircase of the 13th floor. As soon as they showed up, I would shoot the crossbow at the man, play the music to attract the zombies, and use them to deal with the intruders. It wasn't a guaranteed win, just a risky gamble. I was betting on my luck, betting that I could hit the man. I was also betting that upon hearing the sound, the zombies would immediately attack them. If successful, good. If not, once they broke into my house, death was the only exit left for me. Time slowly passed, and Sarah and her companion were moving slower than I had anticipated. My hand, gripping the compound crossbow, was already sweaty and sticky, making me uncomfortable, and my body was numb from maintaining the same position for so long. I dared not move, even keeping my breathing at the lowest possible rate. I feared any slight noise might attract the zombies' attention, and they would deal with me first. Be ready to shoot the crossbow at any moment. When the man saw Sarah waving, he followed her over. The moment he appeared, I didn't hesitate to pull the crossbow trigger. The dark crossbow bolt emitted a faint chill as it whooshed towards the man. A clang sound chilled my heart immediately. Clearly, luck was not on my side. The bolt missed the man by about half a meter, which was not a small error. Lydia. Sarah was briefly stunned. Then a smile appeared on her face. I guess she'd be prepared with supplies, just as I thought. Kill her, and her stuff will be ours. Sarah and the man spotted me. Their voices were low. I couldn't make out what they were saying, but the undisguised intent to kill was clear on their faces. Run, that was my only thought, besides clearly knowing that I was no match for Sarah and the man. Another reason was that my Bluetooth speaker hadn't been activated yet. The zombies were attracted by the sound of the crossbow bolt hitting the wall and were heading this way. The zombies moved quickly and were soon right behind Sarah and the man. There are zombies, Sarah's voice. Damn it, she ambushed us, she's going to pay. Let's shake off the zombies first. Once they're gone, we'll have all the time to deal with that wench. They too heard the zombies. In such a situation, they couldn't afford to focus on me. Taking advantage of this, I pressed the play button. The connected Bluetooth speaker started emitting sound. Pleasant goat and big wolf. Don't look at me just as a sheep. Originally attracted by the noise, the zombies, upon hearing the music, became even more frenzied. Like wolves that had spotted a lamb, they roared and ran towards Sarah and her companion. Even zombies outside were drawn by the sound and started moving towards the building. Sarah and the man must have cursed me countless times in their minds. But they didn't even have time to speak. 2 zombies blocked their path downstairs, and it was unknown how many more would pour into the building. They could only follow my lead and move upwards, which was exactly what I had hoped to see. Not long after the footsteps started, a scream echoed through the building. I knew that my backup plan had worked. The scream did not stop me from fleeing. I ran back to the 18th floor as fast as I could, locked the stairwell door, placed a door stopper, and double-locked my room door, all in one go. After all that, I finally breathed a sigh of relief and sat down to watch the monitors. The 14th floor monitor showed only a pool of blood and a thick arm, clearly belonging to the man, just as I thought he had been devoured by the zombies. On the 15th floor monitor, the man's figure appeared. He barely looked human anymore. His thigh was gnawed down to the bone. His stomach had a bowl-sized hole, and fluid was continuously leaking out. The remaining arm hung barely attached, as if it might fall off at any moment. It's strange, zombies. If it were a normal person, injured like that, survival would be impossible. Yet, the zombified man could still walk. As I was reflecting on this, a terrifying thought suddenly crossed my mind. Blinded by victory, I had forgotten. Sarah was missing. I hastily checked all the surveillance feeds. There was no sign of Sarah, nor any trace of her being bitten. I reviewed the previous surveillance footage and saw what happened after I left. The man stepped on a trap in his panic as he was going upstairs. The screams and the smell of blood drove the zombies into a frenzy, and they threw themselves at him with even more vigor. Seeing this, Sarah decided to abandon the man and leave, but he grabbed her. I couldn't hear what they were saying, but from their expressions and lip movements, it was clear that the man wanted Sarah to take him with her. But she refused. During their struggle, Sarah suddenly pulled out a dagger and stabbed the man, pushing him towards the approaching zombies while he was still alive. It was just like what she had done to me in the past. The footage from before the surveillance shocked me, and it took me a long time to recover and finally understand why Sarah had been able to kill me without hesitation in our previous life. She was ruthless. Completely ruthless from beginning to end. The surveillance continued to play. After killing the man, Sarah looked towards the camera. Her expression was fierce, as if she had anticipated that I would definitely see this scene. Then she took the opportunity while the zombies were devouring the man to escape. Sarah was no longer seen in the footage. Although I had installed surveillance cameras in strategic locations, they couldn't cover every part of the floor. She must have guessed that I could see her through the surveillance and deliberately avoided the cameras. I had a feeling that Sarah was probably not dead, but what would she come up with next to deal with me? It was the 28th day of the apocalypse. Because of Sarah's presence, I hadn't felt like eating properly for the past few days. I was either nibbling on compressed biscuits or eating some chocolate, wasting the ample supplies I had prepared. However, the dangerous situations I had imagined didn't occur, and the days were surprisingly peaceful. Gradually, I let my guard down and returned to my normal life, enjoying my days with plenty to eat and drink. I even got so bored that I pulled out the flowers and plants on the balcony and planted some vegetables instead. I even tried sprouting some beans at one point. I watched countless videos on how to make bean sprouts, but my lack of practical skills led to nothing but wasted soybeans. However, I am good at diverting my attention. I then focused on the rooftop garden, waiting for a day when I felt like it to bring up the soil I had bought earlier and plant something. In stark contrast to me were the other survivors in the neighborhood. As resources became increasingly scarce, some people turned their attention to other survivors. A man named Thomas gathered several followers, feigning helplessness to gain others' trust. When communication was still available, Thomas repeatedly claimed in the homeowners group chat that he had no food at home and hadn't eaten for days, begging others to help him. A couple felt sorry for them and agreed to share some of their supplies, asking them to come up and collect them, but their act of kindness cost them their lives. The moment they opened the door, Thomas's accomplices, who had been hiding outside, rushed in. Not only did they take over their food, but they also killed the couple and threw them off the building. They deceived several households in the neighborhood this way. After the internet was cut off, they began breaking into homes with tools to search for supplies. Many survivors were caught after they broke in, relying on their strength. Young women became their playthings, and anyone who resisted even slightly was killed and thrown from the building. There weren't many zombies wandering around the neighborhood. Most had been drawn to the building where I lived by the music I used to deal with Sarah. Thus, as they searched homes one by one for supplies, my building, which was swarming with zombies, remained relatively untouched. Miraculously, I evaded their search. Time passed quietly again, and when I checked the calendar, the day of the apocalypse had already been 2 months ago. My life hadn't changed much during this period. Bored, I spent my days binge-watching shows and reading books, some of which I had only heard of during my school days but had never read. My skills with the composite crossbow had also greatly improved. Should I encounter the same situation as before, I believe I could confidently hit a man. The zombies downstairs hadn't changed either. I seriously doubted they still followed the natural laws applicable to carbon-based life forms. 2 months without food or drink, yet they still roamed around the neighborhood. Stirred into excitement by the slightest movement, however, their presence was a blessing in disguise, as it kept my living place undiscovered. As for Thomas and his group, their days were getting worse. The remaining resources in the neighborhood had been completely scavenged by them. After exhausting the supplies, Thomas began to use the lives of women and children to blackmail their relatives into scavenging for more resources outside. Initially, these people, held hostage by Thomas, obediently worked, risking their lives to find supplies. Thomas and his group had plenty to eat and drink and began to vent their frustrations on the women. One woman, unable to bear the humiliation, jumped from a building. A man, seeking revenge for his wife, slit his wrist while scavenging, attracting a horde of zombies. Although Thomas's group narrowly escaped, the large number of zombies now in the neighborhood made it impossible for them to venture out for supplies. With the zombies downstairs shielding me, I led a quiet life until suddenly there was a noise outside my door. Someone seemed to be trying to pry open the security door by the stairs. I quickly checked the surveillance and found that the camera on the 18th floor was missing, which was definitely tampered with. Luckily, I had anticipated such an event and had discreetly installed a pinhole camera. Turning on the camera, the long-missing Sarah and a minor internet celebrity, who had seen me moving supplies, appeared on the screen. This is the place, but the door is blocked. We'll need to put some effort into pushing it open. Sarah's voice came from the monitor. I saw her buying a lot of stuff, said it was for a party. Are you sure there's anything left by now? What party? This bitch is lying to you. Why did you only prepare so little supplies after believing those online posts? Sarah complained a bit. I alone could make it last half a year by being frugal. Who knew you would join me later? I didn't eat for free, and you didn't do less of that thing either. The price of a pack of instant noodles outside. Think about how much you've eaten from me. Besides, if it wasn't for me saving you, would you still be alive? What do you mean by that? Before they could start prying the door, they began to argue. Sarah seemed angry, but then seemed to think of something. Don't worry, this bitch definitely has plenty of good stuff. Once we get this door open, we'll have good days ahead of us. After saying this, she even started getting cozy with the internet celebrity. Damn it, I couldn't help but curse out loud. Watching them on the monitor was so disgusting, I almost threw up my meal from the day before yesterday. Fortunately, they hadn't forgotten their main task, to get the door open. After a while, they tried to figure out how to pry open the security door, but the door had already been locked by me with a chain and blocked with a doorstop. Without any tools, they couldn't possibly open it. This allowed me to finally relax. They would have to forcefully break the security door to open it. Forced entry would create a huge noise, and with zombies on both the 13th floor and downstairs, I doubted they would dare to make enough noise to attract the zombies, just as I expected. After realizing they couldn't open the door with their bare hands, the two started looking for tools somewhere. They first tried to pick the lock, spending a long time at it. The lock broke, but they still couldn't open the security door. Then, they attempted to forcibly break through the door, but the noise made by the axe against the door forced them to stop their actions. As such, the two lingered outside on the staircase for a week without finding a way in. Afraid of zombies, they only dared to wield their knives against the weaker ones. Yet they were also terrified that breaking down the door would attract the zombies' attention. Once again, the zombies became my protectors. Over time, the two of them started arguing more frequently. The internet celebrity blamed Sarah for consuming too much of their food supply, while Sarah complained that the internet celebrity was good for nothing but sleeping. Their mental states deteriorated, and eventually, they stopped showing up. The following days were unusually calm. Neither the internet celebrity nor Sarah came by again. However, I was somewhat afraid. This feeling was strange, much like the tense quiet before a storm, so oppressive that it was hard to breathe. Then one night, the sound of glass shattering downstairs startled me, followed by something being thrown down. Zombies downstairs were attracted by the noise and rushed over, feasting on whatever lay on the ground. The sound frightened me, and I felt something was amiss. I stayed up all night, watching from the window, too scared to sleep. Nothing else happened until dawn, and only then did I slowly close my eyes. But soon, I was awakened by the sound of an axe breaking through a door. I quickly turned on the surveillance to see two middle-aged men with axes, working together to hack at the security door. Behind them, Sarah was dressed flamboyantly, leaning close to a burly man. I recognized the burly man as Thomas, the leader of the gang of robbers. Since a large number of zombies had invaded the complex, they had been trapped inside the building, and by now, they should have starved to death. How could they still be so energetic? Recalling yesterday's noises and the disappearance of the internet celebrity, I hypothesized Sarah and the internet celebrity had known about Thomas and his group in my building. They had been protected by zombies on one of the floors below mine and had evaded Thomas's search. When the internet celebrity's supplies ran out, Sarah brought him to try and steal my supplies, but they dared not make any noise. Running out of food, Sarah killed the internet celebrity and survived on his corpse for a while. Facing imminent starvation, Sarah made a desperate move by throwing the remains of the internet celebrity downstairs to distract the zombies and found Thomas, who was also surviving by cannibalism. She brought them here. This was a dire situation for me. They were over a dozen, armed with axes, and could break through the security door in minutes. Even though I had upgraded to a blast-resistant door, it would only be a matter of time before they broke through. I had seen these people commit murder, sparing not even infants. Each had several lives on their hands. If they managed to break in, I couldn't even imagine my fate. Even if I surrendered all my food, they wouldn't spare me. Thomas and his group had lost all humanity. My crossbow had significantly improved accuracy, but relying on it to eliminate all of them at once would only provoke a violent retaliation after they broke through the door. Was there really no way out? Standing by the window, I thought that even if I jumped, I shouldn't fall into their hands, but that would only benefit the scum outside. No, I was determined to go down fighting. With a resolve to die, I looked at the zombies in the complex, intending to attract them all here. There were only a few dozen zombies wandering around, not enough to kill Thomas and his group. What if I attracted all the zombies within a kilometer? I retrieved a drone I had bought while stockpiling supplies. Clenching my teeth, I used a dagger to slice open my arm, allowing the red liquid to cover the entire body of the drone. I hooked up another fully charged phone and looped the song "Don't Think I'm Just a Sheep" at maximum volume. After all that, I quickly bandaged my arm and flew the drone out of the house. I had bought it online for just under 20,000 yuan, with a battery life of 70 minutes. Carrying a phone at an altitude of several meters, covering a round trip of 2 kilometers was no problem at all. The air was thick with a ghastly scent of blood mixed with the magical voices of Pleasant Goat and Big Wolf. This immediately agitated the wandering zombies, who, as if injected with adrenaline, rushed towards the source of the blood scent. Through the drone's transmitted images, I saw that no sooner had it flown out of the neighborhood than hundreds of zombies gathered and followed it. As the drone ventured further, the number of zombies continued to increase. Outside, Sarah and the others had successfully broken through the security door at the stairwell entrance. Thomas, immersed in joy and embracing his lady, directed his lackeys to break down the door, oblivious to the music playing. Inwardly, I prayed that the main door would hold until I managed to draw the zombies in. Only later did I realize I had been overly concerned. Made in China, it allowed no disrespect. The strength of the explosion-proof door exceeded my expectations. Thomas's men took turns attacking. Despite hacking and chopping for 40 minutes, they only left superficial marks on the door. Meanwhile, I had drawn over 1,000 zombies from outside the complex using the drone. These zombies entered the complex en masse, following the drone, and gradually ascended to the 18th floor. By the time Thomas, Sarah, and the others heard the song, the zombies had already targeted them like vengeful spirits, pouncing without giving them any chance to resist. Sarah was the most unfortunate. She didn't even get a chance to mutate before being torn apart and devoured by dozens of zombies. Thanks to the explosion-proof door, these zombies didn't discover me. I continued to operate the drone, drawing away most of the zombies. The remaining ones continued to act as security outside the door. I was rescued 430 days after the crisis erupted, and the authorities interrogated me. I reported in detail all the actions I had taken during the apocalypse. Providing relevant evidence without any concealment, they carefully examined all the evidence and then looked at me. It seems you need to participate in some labor. We need to rebuild, and we can't do it without talented people like you. What, you don't want to join?